Honestly, this is maybe just a very thinly veiled excuse to talk about WandaVision. But can you blame me? But anyway, it's been a while since we did our last pop culture trial. So in this video, we're going to talk about whether Wanda Maximoff committed a kidnapping, and if so, when. Coming up on Legal Bytes. Hey everyone, welcome to Legal Bytes. I'm Alyte, I'm a lawyer, and on this channel we explain the law one bite at a time. So WandaVision ended last week with episode 9 of its first and only season. And at its conclusion, it sets up a really promising storyline for the sequels to Doctor Strange and Captain Marvel. Personally, I found it really entertaining. Maybe a little bit slow to start, to be honest, but as things progressed, they got a little bit more clear and a little more exciting. Anyway, before I go any further, I'm gonna put up a spoiler alert because I know that it's totally possible that not everyone has seen episode 9 of the series. And, there are probably a lot of people that haven't even started it. In which case, you should definitely pause the video now and come back to it after you've finished. Okay, so anyway, as you know, a central part of this show is that Wanda Maximoff essentially kidnaps an entire town in New Jersey, the town of Westview. But I figured we could go through the elements of kidnapping and determine if she actually did kidnap them, and if so, when. So let's start with the definition of kidnapping. So kidnapping is the unlawful restraint of another person, either by force or by threat of force. It can be done either by moving someone from one location to another against their will, or it can be done simply by restraining someone to a specific location, also against their will. So when someone is proving that a crime occurred, they have to prove that there was intent to commit the crime. Now there are two different types of intent. There's general intent and there's specific intent. Some crimes require that Some crimes require a showing of specific intent, and others require a showing of general intent. So, what's the difference? Well, specific intent means that the person intended a particular result, whereas general intent only requires that the person intended to perform the act that ended up leading to the result. As an example, crimes that involve some sort of an attempt usually require specific intent. To show that more concretely, you can look at battery versus attempted battery. To prove battery, you don't necessarily need to prove that the defendant actually intended to cause anyone harm when they threw their fist through the air. All you need to show is that they intended to throw their fist through the air. However, to prove attempted battery, you have to show that they had in their mind the result of causing a battery and that they were actively trying to do it. It's a weird punch. Anyway, the same distinction is true for kidnapping versus attempted kidnapping. For kidnapping, you don't necessarily need to prove that the defendant actually intended to kidnap anyone. However, aggravated kidnapping generally does, and that's because it requires a showing that the defendant committed the kidnapping so that they could further some other additional crime. Some people have given me a hard time about my pronunciation of that word. I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Okay, so all of that about intent is to say that in order to prove a kidnapping, you have to show that Wanda had a culpable mental state, meaning she intended to perform certain acts that ultimately led to a kidnapping. So there are certain defenses that can apply to that requirement. For example, a lack of consciousness, or insanity, either temporary or permanent. Most states have an insanity defense, and it usually falls into one of two categories. But either way, the insanity has to be present, essentially, at the time the crime was actually committed. So the first category of insanity defenses is basically that the defendant was suffering from some sort of a mental defect that prevented their ability to perceive the world around them as it really is. So for example, you could say that there's a defendant out there who was holding an axe and they were taking a swing of that axe at a tree to chop it down. It turns out that the tree is not a tree, but it's a person. That would be an example of a perception-based insanity defense. Now, the other kind of insanity defense that some states do allow is the kind of mental defect that interferes with a person's ability to understand morality, essentially. So they understood what they were doing, they knew what they were doing, they were conscious of it, but they just couldn't appreciate that what they were doing was wrong. So in this case, I don't think Wanda would ever really be able to claim the second form of insanity defense, the inability to understand morality. And it seems her character wouldn't stand for that anyway, based on what we've seen so far. But what we do know is that Wanda was suffering a massive grief. Now, of course, grief on its own is not a defense to committing a crime. If that were the case, there would be a lot more people that are acquitted of crimes. And as we commonly know, that probably contributes to a lot of cycles of abuse. You know, abusers are typically suffering from some sort of emotional harm from their past. And the whole point of criminal law is to punish people's bad behavior. So if somebody knows what they're doing, they understand, but they're just grieving, that's not really going to be a good enough excuse under criminal law. However, by the end of the season, it becomes kind of clear that in the first half, Wanda doesn't really seem to have known or understood what was going on in the TV show any more than the average viewer was.
So, where did you two move from? What brought you here? How long have you been married? And why don't you have children yet?
I think what my wife means to say is that we moved from,
Yes, we moved from...
and we were married.
Yes, we were married.
Well, moved from where? Married when?
No, patients are, they're setting up their story. Let them tell it.
Our story.
Yes, what exactly is your story?
Oh, just leave the poor kids alone.
Well, really, I think it's a perfectly simple question. Honestly, why did you come here?
She seemed just about as bewildered by all of the events in each episode as we were. And that would seem to suggest that she had a total lack of consciousness as to what was going on. It was unclear as to whether she had control over the situation or whether it was Hydra or some other external factor.
And I killed Sparky too.
Whether that lack of consciousness was because of some sort of medical condition or just some form of temporary insanity is unclear. But one thing that does seem clear, at least to me anyway, is that she does seem to be totally not conscious of what's going on. And because of that, an argument can be made that she hasn't actually committed a kidnapping in the beginning of the season. However, by the end of the last episode, it does become clear that she has awareness of the full repercussions of everything that's happened and the fact that she's actually the one that's been in control of this entire town this whole time.
You feel at peace.
We feel your pain.
No.
Your grief is poisoning us.
No, stop.
Please, let us go. If you won't let us go, just let us die, please.
I will let you go. I will.
But although she only has awareness of the level of suffering that she's created for the people in the last episode, her conscious awareness of what actually is happening probably happens much earlier. Personally, I think it's this scene.
Can you believe it? Twins.
I'm a twin. I had a brother. His name was Pietro.
He was killed by Ultron, wasn't he?
What did you say just now?
I said, Wanda, you're such a strong lady. Should I say it one more time for good measure?
No. What did you say about Pietro?
Pietro?
It's the first scene where anything outside of Westview is even mentioned, and the memory of it seems almost jarring to her. Now that's my opinion, so if you think that her realization happened at a different point in time, let us know in the comments below. I'll be super interested to hear it. But here's the thing. Even though I don't think that Wanda has committed a kidnapping at the beginning of the season, at this point in time, the moment that she develops consciousness as to what is going on and what she has done, the moment that she steps forward and continues to keep that in place and doesn't change it, kidnapping. So from then on until the end of the season, when she finally lifts her magic so that everyone can finally go free, she's kidnapping everyone, and that's a crime. So don't do that. Not legal advice, obviously. but don't do that. Anyway, as always, if you enjoyed this, we'd love it if you'd hit the like button. It really does help us with the YouTube algorithm gods. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next video.